Hello, folks.
Hi there.
So it's the last of the series, Kyle's top 100 games of all time,
Hooray!
and it's not 10 through one, it's 25 through one. So you get more goodness here, which is great.
I would agree with that.
Maybe, and I'll be I'll be that cringy judge who will say you're wrong all the time. But that's what I'm here
We'll
for.
see.
Yeah,
Again, I don't know that you've played all of these games, but I sure
but you're
have.
wrong.
Well,
No, it's fine. All right, so let's put this one on here, and let's open up the Board Game Geek tab right here. And I
ooh, we're
think
on the
we'll,
bottom now.
yeah. Oops.
Okay.
The bottom doesn't really work that way because it just, let's do it that way.
Okay. Not feeling like a bottom today.
No, it's just the the stripe there, just
Yeah, that's kind of
is
weird.
in the
It's
way.
better like this, I think.
Yeah, I'll figure out. There are so many different
Okay.
ways to do stuff. But I think without further ado, let's not waste any time and start with the top 100, 25 through 1. And first of all, number 25.
All right, number 25. So this is a game that has been on my list before, but this is a different version of it this time, just because that's the version I've played more recently in the last couple of years. It used to be at my number 9. It is now 25. That is Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North.
Hmm.
So, again, there are three games that are really the same game. There's Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North, and 51st State. They share 95% of the same game design rules, mechanisms, etc. And any day of the week, I would pick one over the other. Currently, I'm quite enamored with Empires of the North. The big difference being in this game, of course, each person has your own deck and you don't have any shared cards. Whereas Imperial Settlers, there were both, and 51st State, there are only shared cards. So with the advent of several new expansions, this one has really risen for me. Whereas Imperial Settlers Base has kind of stalled out, and there hasn't been a lot of new things coming out for it lately. So I'm maybe enjoying this one a little bit more for that reason. It's a great little game, regardless of which version you get. What you're doing is you're essentially building yourself a nice tableau of cards that will enable you to take lots of actions, score lots of points, and hopefully win the game. It is a race to, I believe it's 25 points. That's going to be the end game trigger. And then you will count up who got the most. And the fun is that I think in the base game, there were 8 different factions. And then there have been, I think five expansions that have come out, each with 2 new factions to play with. They're all different. They're all fun. They all do something a little bit bizarre, change the puzzle up just a little bit without adding a ton of extra rules. The components are nice. The artwork is quirky. I just really like this one. It's a real winner for me. It works well solo as well. With solo, you play through a scenario and you're just sort of trying to get the most points and do certain things in a scenario that changes the rules. But as a two-player game, that's how this game shines the best. It's not too long, it's not too hard to get into, and it's a lot of fun. My number 25, Empires of the North.
Yeah, that's the one I played with you in US. And I played Imperial Settlers. I liked Imperial Settlers. It was fun. I mean, as you go further into this extra actions of Imperial Settlers, it becomes a little bit more complicated. And if you don't play it that often, that's one of those games that you need to play it a lot in order to kind of stay fresh. It's not like it. It has this kind of a progression from game to game for yourself, for like each faction. I mean, strategically, how you approach each faction.
Oh, okay. I was going to say it's not a
Progression.
campaign, but
No, 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 no. Not in a mechanical sense. It's not a progression, but I call it progression. There are some games that have this kind of the feel of progression as you play it more and more and more. Mostly, it's LCGs, the CCGs, and all of that stuff. It that has this feel for me.
Okay.
But with this one, I should like it. I should definitely like it. It's everything. It's engine building. It's resource management. It's a card game. It's a really cool artwork in my opinion, and cool theme, civilizations, etc. But I don't, and
Oh.
it's a fine game. But I don't know why. I think I liked Imperial Settlers more than this one. Maybe just this race to the points is one of those things that I just don't like in games. Just I want to have like let's do 7 rounds and then end the game whoever has the most points. And this race to the points just I know this is here, but whoever has the most. But this trigger, I don't like that.
Okay.
So maybe
Yeah,
one of
and of
these things.
course, basic Imperial Settlers had a strict 5 round structure, so maybe you would like that one more. Again, the differences between the games are actually fairly subtle.
Yeah.
And I really like this one. It's one that I agree that if you do put it away for a while, maybe you forget how a couple of things work. But the rules are pretty simple and straightforward, so it's easy to get back into. And it's one I'm always eager to play.
Right?
But if you ask me on a different day, I might say Imperial Settlers instead of it. Those three games are kind of the same and they all share the same spot. But for purposes of any records we're keeping, it's Empires of the North this time.
Yep. Number 24.
Number 24 is a game that I don't think you have played, but it is a game that you should. It is a game I don't think you'll want to because it looks really boring, but it is an amazing Euro game. It is a game that has been on my list for a long time. Last time it was in at number 20. This time it's 24. That is Concordia.
Hmm.
So, Concordia, and there was a spin off game that was about ships crossing the Atlantic. I don't remember the name, but Concordia itself, what you're doing is you have a hand of cards, and each card has an action. On your turn, you'll play a card, and then you have one card that will pick all the cards back up and put them back in your hand. You're sailing around some piece of the ancient world and trying to set up various trading posts and gain goods and earn money. And really the fun part is, though, each card you have, in addition to giving you an action, it has a scoring type of a thing that it does. So, for example, all of the Jupiter cards are going to score the same way, and based upon how many of them you have, that's going to influence how many points you get from doing whatever that scoring thing is. So one of them wants you to have cities in different regions. One of them wants you to have cities on different types of production. One of them wants you to have your soldiers out on the board. And so you can kind of, as you're going along and you're picking the new cards to add to your deck, because there is a possibility to do that, you have to pay attention not only to the action you want, but also to the way that it's going to score for you. And I find that choice very interesting. The game works well at a lot of different player counts. It is one of the few team games that I will play and actually really enjoy. Usually don't like team games, like team versus team, but the team mechanisms in this are a lot of fun too. And on any day of the week, I would gladly play it sort of everyone for himself or in 2 teams of 2. I don't know that I would play 3 teams of 2. I think that would take too long. But I really like Concordia, and it works well with a lot of people, including people who might not look at this game and immediately say, "Aha, that looks like a lot of fun." Because I'll admit it, it does not look like a lot of fun, but it really is.
Yeah, yeah. It's boring looking game for
It
me.
is.
Yet I don't think I'm opposed to this game anymore. I mean, like I kind of was because it looks too dry for me, but I don't think I'm opposed to trying this game. It's not up on my list, somewhere high on my list. One of those games that I should definitely try. But if there's a situation like there's a Concordia on the table, we're on the cruise, and I want to play a game with you, and you already set it up, I'll join you. That's the thing. So, you know,
Well, these are situations that can happen.
I hope not. No, 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 I'm kidding. But
I
yeah,
actually think you will enjoy this one. It has a lot
I
more
might.
to it than it looks like it does.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to number 23.
All right, number 23 is a game that I am 100% sure you have not played. But it is a fantastic game. It is one of
Sure.
so this is a company that doesn't produce a lot of games, but its two biggest games are games that I adore. And this game is called Cloudspire. So
Okay, so
Cloudspire is a game. It's by Chip Theory Games, and so it's heavy and expensive. But what you're doing is you have an army, and that army is composed of characters on chips, and you are sending your army out to attack your opponent's base. You have two different kinds of units. There's these minion-y type units that will move by themselves, and then there are heroes that you can have a little bit more control over. And then you're also building these towers, and the towers are going to shoot at opposing troops every turn. And so you have to sort of get up to the towers and destroy them in kind of a tower defense style, and then keep going. There's only four waves of the game, so it's 4 rounds, so it's not that long. And your goal is to destroy the opponent's base. The different factions, there were 5 in the base set with its expansion, and they're all very different. And then 2 more came out subsequently with a second, I don't know, a second expansion came out with 2 different ones, and they're all very different, all very fun. It's a very difficult game to learn. There's a lot of rules, a lot of keywords, a lot of things that might make you think, I'm not sure I want to try it. But if you can really invest the time to get into it, it's a very satisfying experience. It works well solo as well. There's a campaign book with lots of different solo scenarios that once you kind of get a handle on the rules for solo, it can be really enjoyable and a great way to kind of learn the different factions and sort of solve this interesting puzzle. But as a two-player game, it's really good. I don't know that I love it with 3 and 4 because then it's sort of I don't know that it's balanced all that well for 3 and 4, right? It's everybody picks somebody to attack that turn, and that's not as much fun. But 2 head to head, that's the way to go for this one. It looks great. It has very nice pieces, lots of dice rolling, lots of deterministic combat. Also, lots of different special abilities, ways to upgrade and customize. This is a fantastic game. It was on my list last time at number 13. It's fallen a little bit just because it is so big and difficult to kind of get someone else brought up to speed on, but it is still a game I really enjoy, Cloudspire.
I somewhat like the pieces of this game, not all of them, but overall this game looks boring for me. I mean, like it's just it doesn't look good, especially the boards, the shades of brown and green. The usual ones. It just too washed out or something like that. I don't know. I
They're
just
very
don't like how it
functional, and
looks.
they actually look a little bit better in person than they do on a picture.
Because yeah, this looks really bad. But yeah, I haven't played that one, and I'm not into these kinds of games. Definitely, yeah. So,
You'll see, I didn't say this is one you probably should try.
hmm
This is
indeed.
definitely an investment. Well, the game is very expensive, but it's also an investment of a lot of time to kind of learn what things are, and you kind of have to play it a lot in order to really unlock all the things that it has to offer you.
They have their own, let's say, fans, cheap free games. They
They have some
the
very
fan
devoted
base.
fans,
Yes,
and
the
I
devoted
happen to
fan
be
base.
one. So,
Yeah. All right. Let's get to number 22.
number 22 is a new game on the list. There are
Hmm.
a couple new games here. This is a game that I actually got at Gen Con, and I took it home and I played it just solid for a week. Um, I mean, I played it probably 20 times, maybe 21, 22, somewhere in there, just in a row. It is a cooperative story game with fascinating artwork and very interesting mechanisms. The game is called Vagrant Song.
Hmm.
So lots of these sort of story dungeon crawly games need a lot of pieces and need a lot of stuff.
Hmm.
And this one takes the sort of the core experience, strips all of the periphery out, and puts you right into the story. So the way the story here is that you're essentially a hobo and you get on a train and the door shuts behind you, and then ghosts start to attack you. And your goal is to defeat the ghosts by returning to them their humanity, which really means just, fighting them. And you've got some special abilities, and the way the game works is you've got three coins, and those coins you're going to put onto your actions. And so if you put two coins on one action, well, you're going to make it better. It might be easier to trigger. You might be able to do it twice. But you only really have three unless, so there's a way to get an extra one sometimes. And you're kind of doing, your actions. There's always a different puzzle that you're trying to solve. Sometimes it's pretty much go ahead and beat up the ghost. But there was one that was like this weird sliding puzzle where stuff was moving around. There's one where, the ghost is sort of fixed in place and you're trying to, because she's made out of stone and you're trying to break her out of that. It's always on the same three train cars, but it uses the very simple terrain pieces to transform the train and subtle rules changes to make each adventure feel different. The artwork is fantastic. I am a huge sucker for this sort of 1930s cartoon style artwork. Think, Cuphead or that kind of thing. It's beautiful. It's very engaging. The rules are super easy, simple to get into, but there's so much to explore here. And I dove headfirst into this. And having played through the entire campaign, it is a 20 game campaign that you play through. I would gladly jump into it and play through it again. It was so much fun.
Yeah, yeah, looks cool. Sounds cool. Reminds me of a video game. I think it's also the horror game, kind of a horror-ish video game called Bendy and the Ink Machine. It uses the same art, just
Okay.
exactly the same. Yeah, that you say it's Disney 30s kind of a art as Cuphead as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, sounds cool. Reminds me of that. It's just I don't know why. It's just visually probably, and the theme wise. But yeah, definitely something I would like to try. The art is intriguing. I wouldn't say I love it, but it's weirdly interesting.
And I think if you tried it, I mean, even if you didn't have time to play the whole campaign, you can just open up one scenario and play through it. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
But it's just really what I love is how much it does with so little. There's not a whole lot of components, but it makes use of them in varying ways that are really interesting and fun.
Let me just that I think you talked about it before, but it wasn't on my wish list. So let me put it on my wish list.
There we go.
Maybe Secret Santa will help me out.
I've done some good work. Well, the game is still, as many games, new games, it's having some distribution issues. I was
Yes.
fortunate enough to get one of the few copies they had at Gen Con, but that's because it made it a priority.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Cool. And let's get to number 21.
All right, number 21 is a game that has come down a little bit over the years. It used to be in my top 10. Now last time it was at my number 12. And it's come down just because I don't get to play it as often as I'd like to. Because it really needs three or four players to be perfect. And I often play games at two. The game is Chaos in the Old World. So Chaos in the Old World is kind of the predecessor to many other games. Cthulhu Wars was largely based on it, and some other of Eric Lang's games like Blood Rage share some common DNA with this game. But what you have is you are an evil god of some world in the Warhammer universe, and I don't know a whole lot about the universe, but there are four of these demonic gods that are trying to destroy the world in various ways. And what I love about the game is, each of the different characters has two ways that you can win. You can win by straight points, or you can win by achieving your own goals. And so you have a wheel, and whenever you trigger your ability, you'll rotate the wheel up, and that usually unlocks a new ability for you, a new power, some sort of bonus, and it also moves you up until eventually one of the turns says, hey, you win. And so there are and the four different characters play very differently. There's one that is pretty much just about spreading out everywhere and being in as many places as possible. One of them is about sort of jumping in head first and attacking. One is about more subtly manipulating certain kinds of pieces to have them in different places at the right time. And the other one is about manipulating its power so that it can have, cheap actions early on and then kind of swoop in when everyone else is exhausted and do some things and grab some points. So it's, all of them are fun to play. The artwork is off-putting for some people. It's thematic for the game, though. The game is one of the first games that has that whole exploding dice thing that many people really enjoy. And it was just really a fantastic game and one that I love coming back to every time I have an opportunity. It's, I'm sure, long out of print, and I doubt that you have played it,
Yeah.
but I really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's not something I would try. I don't think so. I'm not into conflict games that much anyway, so but yet, yeah, this sounds cool.
Well, it's not a
Sounds
dry
pretty.
euro. Um,
It's not a dry euro, yeah. But I played the Blood Rage, which is kind of a spiritual successor, kind of a, as they say, of Chaos in the Old World from the same designer. So
Same designer and lots of the same sort of concepts have moved into Blood Rage, although Blood Rage is a very different game. But
probably more Euro-y than this
yeah.
one.
And
Sounds
for this one, for example, there's not really any drafting, right? Everybody has your own deck, and you're only going into that. There's different. They're not the same game, but it's if you knew one and liked one, you probably might have some interest and might already have a foot in the door in the other.
okay. All right, let's get to number 20.
All right, number 20 is a game that I avoided playing for years.
Nice.
And there's a good reason for it. Uh, this is a game that is large and expensive. It requires you to assemble lots and lots and lots of minis, like cut them off of sprues and glue them together. It's huge and sprawling. It has everything against it. But I finally tried it at this year's Gen Con, and I dove in head first. The game is Shadows of Brimstone. And we
Mm-hmm.
talked about it when we did our post Gen Con review, but this is a game essentially about some cowboys who go into a mine and find various horrific monsters there, and also portals to other dimensions and lots of other things to do. I kind of drank the Kool-Aid on this one. So remember, at Gen Con this year, because some of the larger publishers decided not to join, some of the sort of mid-sized publishers were able to take their booth space. And so this game finally had a lot of presence. And I was able to sit down and try it with fully assembled and nicely painted figures. And, and so because of that, I was able to sort of get into it and get an experience of what the game would be like. It's kind of your random throw dice for everything type of a game, right? It's very much story heavy, and rules are, they are what they are. There are thousands of, well, I don't know if there are thousands, but there are hundreds of different expansions, sort of different characters you can throw in, heroes and villains, different worlds to explore. I bought it all. And I have on my dining room table, which is a 12-seater table, it is spread out everywhere and just sort of set up so we can play. Victor, who's visiting me, is painting all the figures, so soon I will have a very nice looking set of this game. But it's just so much fun. There's just this sense of adventure and discovery, lots of scenarios to play. You never quite know what's going to come out, but you can customize it right. You can say, well, this time we're just fighting werewolves, or this time we're going into the lava world and fighting rock, lava monsters, that kind of thing. So you can sort of design it to be completely random or to have some sort of structure to it, whatever you want. I like sort of the variety that comes. There was one game we played that was just a survival. It was survive a certain number of rounds with hundreds of monsters just coming in at you. There's some where you have to go in and find specific things and bring them out. Lots of different ways to play. Your characters progress over time and gain new special abilities. There's lots of different heroes that all do something very different. There's a preacher who preaches sermons that are powerful and violent. There's a mage who casts spells. There's your traditional cowboy who goes in and just does cowboy things. There's I had a gunslinger, sort of a show-offy guy who had special bullets that he could use at special times to boost his attacks. Lots of different things to do. It's definitely a big game. It's It's hard to store. It's hard to set up. There's just so much to comb through. But if you're gonna invest the time in it, it's really my dungeon crawl of choice these days.
Hmm.
Just because it's got a kind of a quirky theme, not your typical, barbarian and wizard going into the dungeon to find the treasure. It's more, just these poor cowboy types from a western town who are trying to investigate the weird things going on. I like that kind of weird west crossover. There's even a Cthulhu that you can put in if you want. I really like Shadows of Brimstone. I recognize it is not for everybody, and the barrier to entry in this game is high, and the cost is high. But if you can overcome those, or even better, play somebody else's copy, it's a really fun experience.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
I assume you have not played that one as well.
No. No. Fun. Nothing to say about that one. All right. Let's get to number 19.
Number 19 is another game that I remember you saying you have not played. This is, but maybe you have. I just forgot. The game is Root, so I'll get that out of the way there.
Yeah.
So this was my number 14. It's now my 19, so it's at roughly the same position.
Basically.
Root, you have an animal character, and you are essentially fighting for control in a very small, tight woodland region. There are four different factions in the base game, and they all play very differently, have different ways to win. You have one that's sort of building stuff up and wants to sort of play a Euro game. You have one that is a programming game, and you have to sort of program your moves and then do them every single turn. And as long as you're doing them, you're fine, and you'll be able to win. But if ever something goes wrong and you're not able to, then your world comes crashing down, and you have to start all over again. There's a character that kind of moves around and trades stuff. There's a character that's very small, cheap, weak units, but kind of gets bonuses from being everywhere. And then there are some expansions, right? There's different two expansions that are currently out that add a bunch of new characters. What's fun about this is that there are just so many different ways to play. What's not fun is teaching it. It is definitely a difficult game to teach just because there are so many different intricate rules. It would be okay. I'm teaching you right now, so don't nobody else listen. We're we're talking about your rules now, and then when did yours, we'd go on to somebody else. So there is that. That's kind of a disadvantage. The artwork is cute and fun, and to be praised for lots of reasons. The gameplay it's not long, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. It is better with higher player counts. At 2 players, it's not that great, to be honest. But at 3 and 4 is probably where it shines. And there's a lot to love here. It has the seriousness of a war game with the charm and quiet, fun of this quirky artwork. I just really enjoy Root.
Yeah. I bought this game at some point. I remember, was it in, I think it was in Gen Con or not,
Did
maybe.
you?
Or maybe I
I
backed
remember I
it.
had wanted to show it to you at Gen Con, but we ended up not having time.
Um, the thing is, I might have backed it or bought it somewhere. I remember being at the booth, maybe I don't know, somewhere.
Okay.
Anyway, doesn't matter. And the problem the problem I got with this game is I kind of tried to learn the game. It's hard, and while learning the game, I realized that oh no, I'm I might play it once, and it might not be the best experience, and after that, I will never play it again. I just realized that my play group and everybody would enjoy the game, and there are people like from my play group who bought the game and they enjoy it.
Hmm.
But still, this is one of those games you need to play quite a few times, almost in a row, basically.
Yeah.
Like once a week or at least. It's something. And I realized, okay, I'm not the gamer who plays something a ton and then moves on to another game. I have this or that game that there are a few games that I play a lot, but
Hmm.
they are easier to grasp. This one is not. So
This one is not.
just just this the barrier of learning, and you know, by playing it rarely will not
Yeah.
benefit it. And I would
So I
just
will say
stalled it.
one thing, and well, fair enough, right? And it sounds like it's one maybe you might want to try at some point. I don't know, but the one thing that is now out that was not out before is there's a fantastic app implementation of this game, which is a
Mm.
fantastic way to learn it. And it really will walk you through the different factions.
Hmm.
And so, if ever you wanted to kind of catch up on it so that you could play with that group of friends, that app, I don't always recommend learning things through an app, but for this game, it's fantastic.
You know, each time I try an app as a board game, I feel unsatisfied, and I've
Sure.
tried good apps. The problem is each time I try something online, the virtual implementation, the let's say the computer implementation, whatever the app implementation of a board game, I feel like just I
Fair
cannot
enough.
play that way. I need to have this physical. I really like, having this physical touch of
Understand.
components. Anyway,
Well, and so there's that. I mean, but it is a great way to learn it if ever you wanted to. But it's also one that we could set up and try. If it happened to be on a table, and and we happened to be together, it would be a good one to try. I think it's worth trying, even
we'll
if
see.
it is a bit of a rough learn.
Hmm.
It also has one of my least favorite rules to teach. So there's
Mm.
that.
All right, let's get to number 18.
All right, number 18 is a game. So we just talked about Root being a game you got to play a few times to really understand. Number 18 is a game that you really have to play a bunch of times to understand. In fact, when I taught it to you, I had not played it for a long time, and it was a sweaty, hard, horrible struggle. I'm much better at teaching it now because I've played it a lot more in the meantime. The game is Through the Ages.
Hmm.
So Through the Ages is a fantastic civilization game. I just played a new one that's a new civilization game that might even be better, but that's for a different. It's not going to be on my list, so we're going to talk about Through the Ages. It's a civilization game where you don't really have a big board that you're building stuff onto. Instead, it's just cards that you're buying, and as you buy the cards, you're going to put them into different stacks. For example, as you improve your resources, you'll make a stack that's you've got your resources that are worth 1 and 2 and 3, and so then as you're able to produce better and better. And you're using very simple components. You've got essentially blue cubes and yellow cubes. There are also some red ones, but and white ones, but you're using the cubes to be different things. So depending on where they are, they're going to have different values. I find that very interesting, and the way that it kind of unlocks pieces and costs and other things throughout the game. I find that interesting. But really, what you're doing is you're building up your civilization. You're trying to craft it in such a way that it's going to specialize in certain things, or you can be very militaristic and sort of force the envelope on force your opponents to do that. You can just build wonders and theaters and things and spread your culture around. There's a lot of ways to explore it. It is a long game. I will warn people about that. And it is a game that I almost never want to play with more than two, just because of its length and because of its difficulty to teach. It is a rough learn and a rough teach, but if you can get into it and sort of familiarize yourself with the rules, they're not that hard. Uh, it's just sort of getting through the door. And once you're through there, there's a ton to explore here. I have really enjoyed this game, and I continue to enjoy it immensely. I don't get to play it as often as I would like just because there is a huge barrier to entry here. But if I can find somebody who knows how to play it, it is a fantastic, just really good civilization game that I really enjoy.
Yeah, the one that I played, the one that is, I don't know, for civilization game to be easy, it's not gonna be a civilization game then. It's gonna be civilization themed game at most, like Tapestry, etc. Which Tapestry is a lighter game. Through the Ages is through and through a civilization game. I can see the benefits. I can see why people love it. Yet another one, like the Root. You have to play. You have to
Absolutely.
learn it on. You have to be invested in this game. You have to be a fan. You have to be this crazy fan base. Otherwise, it's not a game for you. I would not recommend this game for everyone. This is a niche, in my opinion. Though many people love it, but like many people, what do I mean by many people? If you look in a scale of Wingspan, many people, there are many, many, many more people who love Wingspan because it's a broader game amongst
Sure.
non-gamers or light gamers. This one has a very strong fan base, a lot of people who play it, but they are kind of a niche in this world of board games. That's
Yeah.
my feel.
People who like this game like it a lot, and other
Yeah.
people don't play it at all. So that's kind of
Though
how people come out on this one.
I played it once, I rated it an 8 and said I will never play it again.
Fair
So
enough.
I just realized how great of a design it is and how too complicated it is for nowadays. Just
Fair enough.
nowadays we need to have a little bit lighter games, in my opinion, and very few heavy games. Anyway, let's get to number 17.
All right, number 17 is a game that is heavy physically. It's in an enormous box. Rules wise it's not so hard. This is sort of an it's it uses a lot of the mechanisms in games like Manhattan Project. In fact, it's by the same designer, or at least one of the same designers. The game
Uh,
is Dwellings of Eldervale, and
yeah,
although I frequently refer to it as Everdell, um,
Everdale. Yeah,
I, I have a lot of trouble keeping those two words apart, even though
dwellings,
they are
just
different words.
dwellings.
Either way, what you're doing here is you're one of, I believe, 10 different factions, different colors of magic. Maybe it's 8, I don't remember. But what you're really doing is you're putting your workers out, and you're going to be putting a worker out each turn until a turn comes where you're going to take your workers back. It's kind of a lot like a game we talked about a few episodes ago called Manhattan Project Energy Empire. But what you're also doing is you're building, again, this sort of tableau of actions that's going to give you things to do when you bring the workers back. Ultimately, as in order to progress the game, you have to build dwellings, and those are going to eat up your workers. You build a dwelling by putting a rooftop on your worker and putting it on the board permanently. And so that kind of messes with the engine you're building because now you don't have as many things to put out. So there's that consideration. The characters all have different special powers. Not major ones. Usually I think there's 2 per player. And they're different. They make things kind of fun and interesting. And then there are these large monsters that are ridiculous and overproduced. They are these large plastic monsters, and they're on these bases, and when you move them, they make a roaring noise, which is completely unnecessary, but also a lot of fun, and I would never play without them, even though I acknowledge that they are not necessary at all.
Yeah,
And so, there's some combat. The combat's interesting because it's almost Risk-like. So what you'll do is you'll roll a certain number of dice, and whoever rolls the single highest die of that combat, regardless of how many people are there, that person wins. And then, if 2 people tie, then you look at their next highest die, and sort of you go down until somebody has a die that was higher than somebody else's. It's an interesting way to do combat. It makes it very simple, and it also means that regardless of how overpowered you are, how outmatched you are, you always have a chance, right? I mean, if I roll 1 6 and you roll 4 4s and 3s, then I'm going to win. So that's an interesting way to do it and sort of to keep everybody involved. It's pretty simple. The rules are not hard. The game is not long, but there's a lot to explore here, and it's maybe a bigger game than it needs to be. But also because it's so big, it kind of feels like a real treat when you're able to get it out. But I really enjoy Dwellings of Eldervale and continue to enjoy playing it and hope to do so again soon.
yeah. That's not the one that I played the final version of, but I played the prototype on the cruise long time
Okay.
ago. Well, it was still in development with this is Luke Laurie's design, but there's Peter was also there showing the game. This is from Breaking Games, and it was really Breaking Games. And Sam Healy also was there, and it's like, let's try it out. Let's try the prototype
Okay.
out, and it was great. I really liked it already. So it's like, oh, it's from Luke Laurie who made Manhattan Project or the
Right.
Energy Empire. Energy Empire, sorry. And yeah, I was kind of in. I haven't played it since. I haven't played the final version. I didn't have a chance. I didn't back it on Kickstarter because I thought like I will buy it retail later. At the point,
Okay.
I just wasn't backing Kickstarters, and yeah, just haven't had a chance. But this is the one that's on my list, on my wish list that I would love to get into my collection because I'm sure I'm gonna love it. Yeah, so we'll see.
Yeah. Well, and if you liked Energy Empire, there's nothing you would not like about this. I would say it like that.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. This one has a really cool mechanisms. Okay.
Yeah, those things are even better, right? It's like Energy Empire, but a little bit better.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, number 16.
all right, number 16 is a deck building game, and this is a war themed deck building game that is just fascinating. The game is called Undaunted, and it is new to the list because it came out kind of after I did the last list. But really, the first version of it is World War II, kind of your standard Allies versus Axis. And are you able to put it up there, Undaunted?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. You don't have to. But and so what you're doing is deck building stuff, right? You have goals that you're trying to do, and each you've got units that are out on the board. And so when you play a card, that's going to activate that unit and allow it to do things like move or attack or mess stuff up. And then when somebody attacks and hits your unit, you're going to find a card of that unit in your deck and trash it, throw it away. So as the game goes on, your deck is being built as you buy new cards and then culled for you as people attack your units. And so kind of like a game like War Chest or something like that, the more of cards that you have of a particular type, the more you'll be able to activate particular units. And so there's a lot of decision that goes into there. It's kind of the same cards every turn, every game, although you might have some that are in one round and not in another. But there's a lot of decision making that goes into sort of building and tinkering with the contents of your deck because you also end up with a lot of crap cards and you never want those. And then there's also these war objectives that you're trying to do, whether it be occupy a certain point, hold a certain point for a certain number of rounds, kill your opponent, get somewhere. Lots of different things to explore. There's also a North Africa version, which I think is better, but it's also a little bit more complicated. There's just a few extra rules, and so I've played the European theater version a lot more. Now those minis and stuff that you saw in those pictures, those aren't in the game. It's all those chips, but the chips are very functional. They're not amazing, but they're functional, and they work really well to kind of do what you need them to do. The artwork's okay. I mean, it's lovingly done. I don't know. I could take it or leave it. But the game itself is so much fun to play, and it's fun to play. It's short and fast, so it's one that you can kind of set up and play, lose, and then set up and play again very quickly. I really enjoy Undaunted.
Yeah, that's the one that I haven't tried yet, but I like Osprey Games designs usually, and
Sure,
it's 2 player, and
it is.
I'm not buying too many 2 player games into my collection because I play
Neither am
more.
I.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, it's just because it's just a 2 player game. That's why as I haven't really got into it. But why not? I would definitely try it out because it's deck building. The war theme doesn't really. I don't know. It's not something I would love to play. But why not? Yeah, just for the mechanism, just for the game itself.
Yeah, and I think you probably would really enjoy it if you were able to find it and play a couple rounds of it.
Yeah. All right, let's get to number 15.
All right, number 15 is on exactly the same spot as it was last time. It is the driest of dry Euro games. In fact, it has a boring theme, and that boring theme doesn't even show up in the game. The game is called Russian Railroads,
Hmm.
and this is a game about getting points and exploiting various bonuses to the best of your ability. That's really what the theme is. Yeah, sort of theoretically, you're building railroads across Russia or Germany or the U.S. or soon, eventually, hopefully, Asia, um, if that ever comes out. But it's about figuring out what you're going to do and just doing it as much as you can. We talked about a game called First Class on the last episode. This is First Class. I think they're the same designer, but they definitely have a similar feel to them. But I like Russian Railroads a little bit more because it's a little bit longer,
Mm,
a little bit more going on. It's at its core a worker placement game. But what you're going to be doing then with those workers is upgrading your various tracks. So you can go for getting lots of bonuses by sending this sort of wimpy, worthless black track out as far as you can and just try and trigger bonuses. There's this purple thing that can get you a lot of points and a lot of bonuses, but doesn't really contribute to very much else. There are other smaller tracks that you can build and kind of max out and then get different bonuses. You can upgrade your types of tracks so that you're scoring points for how many spaces they've gone around. Lots of different things to think about. Some end game scoring goals that you can get at various points. But it's just so much fun to set it up and try a different way to win. And there are just so many different things to try and explore with. Now, I do prefer the German Railroads version slightly above the Russian. It's just an expansion. But I like that because then your tracks are all customized and your bonuses are all customized and different. And I find that fascinating. But I could play any version of this anytime. I love it at a two-player, at two players, but it also works well at other counts. And the theme is not there at all. And even if
yeah.
it were, the theme isn't all that interesting. But the game itself, this is a game that survives on its mechanisms alone, and I love those mechanisms. And so it is and has been my number 15.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the game. Out of the two, I felt like I only need one. So I have first class. I like
Okay.
first class a little bit more. Probably because it's customizable, and I didn't have a chance to grab German railroads because it was
Okay.
out of print. Basically, it was nowhere to find.
It's
And
difficult to find.
at some point, it was just nowhere to find. And then maybe now they've reprinted or had some extra copies. I don't know. Maybe in US. I
I don't think
not.
so. It's still very difficult to find. They have commented that the publisher is producing something called Ultimate Railroads, which will include German, Russian,
Hmm.
American, and the new Asian. It was supposed to come out this summer, but it didn't. And I don't know what
Yeah.
the status of it is. And I probably will buy it, right? Because it'll be a bigger
Hmm.
box to hold everything. And at that point, I might be willing to part with my current copy. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
This is just I like this one a little bit more than First Class, just because it's a little bit harder, and First Class is a little bit easier, at least in
it
terms of what you're doing.
it is. It is. But this one is a worker placement. First class is more of a card game. Let's
Right.
say this one is really solid worker placement with building up, kind of like an engine building. Not really. It's
It's
resource
a train
building.
engine building.
Yeah, train engine building. Yeah, no pun intended. But
No, very much intended.
okay. But anyway, yeah, it's a high scoring game. It's something I was surprised that I liked that much. I thought I shouldn't. It was amazing. Yeah, just between the two, I chose just one,
Okay.
and yeah. But yeah, why not? I will if there will be German railroads or anything like that available at some point. I might try it out to see what else is there about this game.
Okay. Sounds like a good plan.
Number 14.
All right, number 14 is another deck building game. This is a game that I don't think you have tried, but I do remember you saying that you really wanted to. The game is Imperium, and there's a
Yeah.
Classics and a Legends. They are the same game. In fact, they have the same rule book. It's just one box has this set of civilizations, the other box has another. They are 100% the same game. So this is a deck building game, and it's a weird deck building game, and it's a complicated deck building game with lots of different, strange terms and keywords, lots of things not to like, but a whole lot of things to like, because each of the different civilizations that you can have plays a little bit differently. And what you're trying to do is, you're building your deck, because it's a deck building game, but you're also, you're doing it by buying cards from kind of a common row, but you're also, as the game progresses, the game is going to build your deck a little bit for you, because every time you go to reshuffle, you're going to pull a card out of a special pile that's just for you and add it to your deck. And eventually, after you've done that enough time, you upgrade to an empire rather than a barbarian horde, and you can use different cards then. Your older cards become less useful to you. In fact, you can't use some of them at all. But you have access to newer, better cards. And then you're going to be buying cards when you go through the deck from a separate stack of really interesting ones that are specific and customized to you. And I find that very fascinating. I love how all of the different civilizations play a little bit differently. Not a whole lot. There's just a few small subtle changes, but it makes one feel different than the other. I have both sets and I just mix them together. There's no reason not to do so. And I really love this. And I love it as a two-player game. Three players is a little on the long side, and I haven't tried it at four. I don't think I would. But as a two-player game, it's nice back and forth. And as a solo game, it is fantastic. It has a very well-designed solo system straight out of it, and it makes somebody spent a lot of time doing this. Probably David Tortzi, because he's sort of the king of solo games. But there's a different way that each of the different factions will play as a solo opponent. So you can have any matchup in the game as a solo game and sort of have that same core experience that you were looking for as a two-player game. I love that. The artwork is fun. I like it. It's definitely very stylized, but it's interesting. The card quality is fine. The components are functional, but the gameplay itself is very well designed. And I really would love another 5 or 10 civilizations to come out. I'm sure they probably will at some point. But I really love this. It's one of my favorite deck building games and one of my favorite civilization games, and it marries those two really well. It's new to my list, I should have said, because it just came out this year.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm very interested in this game. I will get to it. I haven't been able to get to it yet, and it is complicated. It seems to be very complicated, but that's fine. It's Osprey Games. It's a card game. It's a civilization game. It's a deck building game. Checks all the marks for me.
Yep,
I'll get to it eventually.
I
Yeah.
hope so.
I'm sure I'm gonna like it. I'm sure I'm gonna be stressed out because it seems to be very complicated in a sense of I don't like this. Let's use our own terminology, thing like Android Netrunner thing. It seems to have that problem.
It does, and lots of the rule book is really a problem because lots of the rules aren't actually in the rule book; they're in the glossary. And so that's it's a very difficult game to learn from the rule book. Trust me, that's how I learned it. Uh, but it's a good game to have someone else teach you. I guess I'd say it like that.
Okay, all right. Let's get to number 13.
All right, number 13.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, see, look, I have very few occasions to wear my number 13 hat, so I'll put it on for this. My number 13 is a game that came out. It was new last time. It was my number 10 last time, so it fell just a tiny bit, but that's just because there was some general reshuffling. The game is a two-player, or three or four, but you really shouldn't, head-to-head game. The game is Unmatched. And Unmatched is just so fascinatingly fun. This is the type of game that I just really like. I love two-player head-to-head fighting games. And this one it uses cards for your combat and cards for your actions. You can, when you attack it, it's going to be very deterministic. But what you have is in the base game 4 characters. Then a couple of expansions have come out. There and they have different characters from various intellectual properties or sort of public domain characters. You've got King Arthur, you've got Medusa, you've got Sherlock Holmes, you've got the Invisible Man. And then, there's some licensed ones, like there's a Buffy the Vampire set. There are some Jurassic Park characters, including some dinosaurs. There's Deadpool, some Marvel stuff coming out, and each of the different characters feels slightly different. The rules are generally the same. The actions you have on your turn are simple and easy to understand. But what it is, the joy that comes out of this game is exploring how your character is going to make its strengths and weaknesses work and how you're going to be able to defeat your opponent. And it often feels like whatever character your opponent is playing is overpowered, but that's because your opponent probably thinks that about you because they're all unmatched. But it's a lot of fun. The board doesn't look amazing, I will say that, but it is very functional and it really helps with the line of sight. It has this great way of determining whether you can hit something based upon what color space you're standing on. Which, okay, it makes the board look ugly, but it is very functional, and so I'm willing to deal with that. The artwork on the cards is fantastic. They have really good artists who have really imagined the characters in different ways. And the characters are all, like I said, a little bit different. And now there are enough. Originally, there weren't quite enough for the game to shine. Now there are, somewhere around 20. And that's enough for the game really to be very interesting because you can have lots of different matchups and lots of different scenarios that are fun to think about. So I really enjoy Unmatched.
Yeah, it's straightforward PvP. I just didn't like it.
Okay.
That's it.
That's a way that you can feel about
Yeah. Number 12.
All right, so we're done with that. We can't really wear a number 13 hat other than at number 13. So,
Yeah.
all right, number 12. Number 12 is a game that I do believe you have played. It is a game that was my number 4 last time. I don't know why it has fallen. Maybe I just haven't played it. I mean, there's no reason. It's a game I really love, I guess I would say. But there's as time goes by, things reshuffle. The game is Scythe, and Scythe is an odd game to describe, right? Thematically, you're in this sort of World War I time period with large mechanical robots running around doing various things. What's interesting in this game is sort of the way you can upgrade your own self. You've got a different character with a small special power, and then you've got a board of actions that you're doing. And as you go through, you'll make some actions better, some worse. The board is, you're kind of going out. The combat is pretty straightforward. You have a resource you can pay, and you have a number of cards you can play to kind of mess with the calculus. But it's sort of the kind of combat where you can think about it and try and outthink your opponent, which is interesting. The different characters are fun to play. There's a lot of different. There's this campaign version, which I enjoyed. I've played it through twice now. I don't know that the story was all that great, to be honest, but it was nice to sort of see a nice way that the new various game mechanisms from that particular expansion were able to work in, and some of them are the kind of thing I'd always play with. It's got great artwork. That's something that pretty much everyone will praise about the game. And the component quality is nice. It's just there's a lot to love in Scythe. It's not that hard. There aren't that many rules, but the way that you can kind of play with things makes it very interesting. It also has one of my least favorite rules to teach, but that's there's that. But I really enjoy Scythe. It's one that I'm always looking to play. I don't know how many times I've played it, but it's a lot. There was a time when I was playing this game all the time. I'm at 173. That's not too bad. And I just really like this game. And I don't know why, but there's just so much to love, so that's probably why. Anyway, currently my number 12, down from my number 4, but still really liking Scythe.
Yeah, it's a good game as a base game. Expansions don't really the first two expansions don't really add that much to the enjoyment. Maybe for few, but Rise of Fenris makes this game an amazing one.
Yeah, I would say
That's
the
all I'm gonna
first
say.
expansion adds a lot, right? Because it adds two extra factions. The second expansion, those airships, I never play with them. They're
I
kind of a
I would
waste for
say
me.
having Rise of Fenris and the two factions from Rise of Fenris, though I hate one of the factions there, it's still a really cool. I'm just not an aggressive player in the sense of like in
Sure. And
Scythe.
I
I don't
am.
like aggressive.
So,
But the faction there is great. It's both factions. The
sure.
first two extra factions are boring. The
Oh,
trap
okay.
setting, I don't know. It just they kind of felt like something extra with this extra tiny rule that you need to kind of check every now and then. I just felt these two extractions weren't on par with all the other factions that were
Okay.
more interesting in my opinion, especially yellow and red or
Very
black
well.
or blue. If all of them were, I don't remember the
Or
names.
wide. I mean, don't forget about wide.
Oh, I forgot about that one. I like
They're all
Vesna
fun. I
faction
find them
the
all
most.
fun. Okay.
Let's get to number 11.
All right. Number 11 is down. It's up a little bit. It was my number 19
Up
before.
and down.
Yeah, it was. It's up from number 19. It's now number 11. It is a game that you have not played, although I have suggested it on many occasions that you might enjoy it. The game is Clans of Caledonia. This is
Sure.
a
Hmm.
wonderful Euro game, and it's a game that I am terrible at, right? Because I tend to focus on one or two things that are not the things that get you points, but I always have a fun time doing it. Really, what this game is about is fulfilling contracts and building up your resource production.
So much
There
fun.
are you're in Scotland and you can build various kinds of factories to produce different kinds of goods like cheese
Ooh.
and whiskey and bread, but
Ooh.
you have to get the raw materials like milk and grain.
Wow.
And so thematically, okay, not that interesting. But what is interesting is that each person has a different special ability that kind of helps them focus on one or two aspects of the game, which is really interesting. There's a simple market mechanism that's going on in there. There's sort of some area control, right? And then there's trying to build out next to your neighbors because you get bonuses when you do. There's the contracts you can get, and the contract pricing changes is a nice wrinkle in the game. And there's just so much to love here. It's a dry theme, I'll admit that, but it's lovingly implemented and very well implemented in a game that is actually not that big, but really there's a lot of space to explore. And it's one of these games that I'm just really always in the mood for, which is good because I have a friend who's always in the mood for it. But but I really like it. I would love an expansion. It's been out several years now, and I wouldn't mind a little bit more. But the solo in this one is kind of weak. I'll say that. It's kind of an unsatisfying solo experience. But as a two, three, or four player game, I just really like this one.
There are few games that I will never touch, and you might have just talked about one of them recently,
I'm
very
uh,
recently.
very recently.
Yeah,
Was that a
extremely
match?
recently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, kinda.
So now I've only played it
I don't
34
match it with
times.
my taste. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. But I don't know. I'm always really in the mood for this one. It speaks to something. I have no idea what, but it's very well designed and a lot of fun to play.
You like your farming, that's fine. And Clemens
I
Front's
do.
artwork is best for some people, worst for me. But that's
Okay.
fine. Yeah. Let's get to the final 10.
The
Starting
top
with number
10.
10. The top 10, yeah.
All right, number 10 is a game. It was number 7 last time. It's fallen just a tiny bit, but again, there's no real reason for the changes in this. I don't know that I have anything new in my top 10. I think it's just some slight reorderings based upon what I've played recently and how I felt when I made the list. But it is a game I really enjoy. It's a big game. It is I've played it lots of times. Actually, not that many, just because it's so big. But it's around 25. Um, but it's a huge, monumental game. The game is Dinosaur Island.
Oh,
So
I thought you'd say monumental.
no, I like monumental, but I've not. It's not on my list. So this is a game where you are building up your own dinosaur park. The artwork is a choice, but it's fun and quirky.
Well
Lots of
said.
pink and purple. Um,
Yeah.
but what you're doing is, again, you're building up your dinosaur park, and so you're going to be buying different types of dinosaur DNA. You'll be using your scientists to create dinosaurs, and then you're trying to build excitement around your park so that people will come in, and then you're hopefully trying to build some security in your park so that people all also don't die, because that will, of course, cost you points. The expansion is fantastic. It adds a whole lot of more things to do, sort of different ways to focus, some park design goals that kind of help the game to be a little more new player friendly, just because it gives you something to focus on. But even the base game is really really good, really fun. There's a lot. It's very procedural, right? You're going to do this now, and then this, and then this, and so that can be a little hard to grasp for people. I'm not sure where, because there's the brand new Dinosaur World, which is also amazing, and I'm not sure where I would rank the two next to each other. When I'm playing one, I think it's better than the other, but when I play the other, I think it's better than So I mean, but it's really good. This is just a fun game. The theme is sort of Jurassic Park without the license, but that's okay because dinosaurs are public domain. Uh, but there's just lots of different special powers you can unlock. There's bonuses that you'll be able to get. There's some sort of economic pieces of this because money can be kind of tight at certain points in the game. And then there are goals to focus on, which is kind of your end game trigger. Just really a lot to like here. Other than the fact that it takes up about 16 tables. This is the first rule in setting up the game is map out the game's footprint. It's written right there in the rule book, and that's definitely true because it takes up a lot of space. And that's maybe its only ding, but everything else about this game I like.
It's it's the one that let's say the artwork is not so stellar.
It's a choice.
Very much a choice, a taste, a matter of taste, definitely. But if you look at it, the whole thing here on the table, for example, it just doesn't cry out, play me, from the first glance. Yet, the theme is great, and I've recently acquired a copy. Uh,
Oh,
it was on. We had great sales here,
okay.
like some 50% off, and then I was like, okay, so because in European Union, games cost much more than they do in US, mostly because you have tax-free kind of online shops, and we add at least 20% to those plus, all other taxes, and then eventually this one costs around 80 euros, which is about 90
It's a lot.
$90 at least, something like that, $95. Yeah, it's too much. But 50% off, it's fine.
Pretty good.
So that's why I got this game.
Well, I hope you'll like it. The rules are a little rough to learn, but once you can get into it and just sort of it's so the one thing I'll say about it is the theme, in some games like Russian Railroads, the theme is there just sort of to check a box. In this game it really fits, right? What you're doing sort of fits with the whole thing of I'm building up dinosaurs and then they're going to get out and rampage if I don't keep them under control. And so everything really kind of works in this game, and that's one of the reasons I like it.
Okay.
It's a dry Euro, but it's a very fun and juicy dry Euro.
Okay. Let's get to number 9.
Okay. Number 9. This was my number 23 last time, so it has gone up quite a bit and pushed some other things down, apparently. It is a game that I played so much last year. And that was because, remember when things were kind of shut down, it has a great solo mode, and I just got it out, and I set it up, and I left it up, and I just played it and played it and played it. It is a another game by Chip Theory Games. The game is called Too Many Bones, and it's it's that, right? I mean, what you're doing is you have a character, and your character is going through a number of encounters and eventually fighting some sort of big bad guy, a supervillain, as it were, who's called a tyrant in the game. And as you're going to go along, you're going to improve your character's abilities because pretty much after every encounter, you're able to upgrade one or two things, which means you can unlock a new die that you're going to be able to roll. You can upgrade your attack or your defense or your movement. You can and yeah, there's just different ways to explore, and there's a bunch of different heroes that you can play with, and each one has very, very, very different things to do. And so, you've got one who's really big about just defense. He can go out there and take a ton of damage. And you can upgrade that. You can lean into it. You've got sort of one girl who she just makes all kinds of explosives and can customize these explosives and throw them out and just do a ton of damage. But once she does that, she's weaker for a while as she slowly builds up her reserve. You've got your standard archer who can hide unseen and shoot from everywhere and lay traps. You've got a girl who has this werewolf or this large wolf, I guess it's not a werewolf, that's following her around, and she can use herself and the wolf. You've got a lady who rides a giant pig, and it goes and stomps over people and tramples them. There's just a lot of different things to try here, and they're all fun. I've enjoyed playing with all of the different characters. I've enjoyed playing all of the different bosses, which are very different. And it's you never quite know what you're going to get in a game of Too Many Bones, especially with the newest expansion, which lets you kind of customize the tyrant as you go, which is a really fun way to play. I just really like this. It's great with any number of players. My preferred, of course, are going to be one or two, but both of those are excellent. It is huge. It is heavy. It is super expensive. And it comes in now it can come in a huge wooden box, this huge crate that takes up a full kind of box on a calyx shelf. That's this lovingly designed storage system, but makes it impossible to transport. It's a game that is not for everyone. My sister refers to it as too many rules because it definitely has them. But I really love this. I found it at Gen Con many years ago, sat down at the demo and said, okay, this game's for me. And I have loved it ever since then. And it's a game that I play a ton. And it's a game that I'm always looking sort of to experience and to try and show new people how to play. The last year cemented this game as one that I really think belongs in my top 10. And so it comes in here at number 9.
Okay. That's fine.
Again, one I don't think you've played.
No, not at all. All right, let's get to number 8.
All right, number 8 is another deck building game, and I like a lot of deck building games, I guess.
That's fine.
This one is down from my number 5, very small drop. It is a cooperative. It's a cooperative deck building game. It's one that you have played. At least you played one of the versions of it, and the game is Aeon's End. So, Aeon's End, you are a team of mages, and you're fighting against some horrible force that is coming in and invading your city. And each of these imposing enemies has different things that it's going to do, and that keeps things very different. It keeps the game fresh and new as each of these bosses provides a new challenge. The fun sort of quirk of it is as you're building up your deck, you have a little bit more control because you're not normally going to be shuffling it. So the order in which you discard things is, again, the order in which they're going to show back up to you. So that adds a little bit of a decision point there. And then, really, you're buying the cards you want. You're upgrading your spell portals, which allows you to cast more spells and do more damage on them. And there's a couple of ways to win. And depending on the boss, you might be going for one versus the other. One way is just to last, right? If you can last until the end of this boss deck, you win. The other way is to, of course, go in and do some serious damage to the boss to bring it down to no life. That's another way to go. and you're also trying to stay alive, and there's going to be all kinds of minions and monsters come out. It's a lot of adventure going on here with, relatively simple rules, but small changes to this puzzle that are going to happen each time you play as you use different enemies that you're fighting. I really like the game. I've always really liked the game, and they've been supporting it a lot. And I think we might be at the point where I don't know that it needs any more expansions. There's one more that's kind of on its way, but who knows, right? I'm never going to say no to more. But there's sure a lot going on and a lot of things. Even if they never made another deck for this, I would have plenty to play with. I really love this game, and so it is my number 8, Aeon's End.
Yeah, it's a fine game. It, it was fun trying it out, but it's not for my taste. It seems
Okay.
not completely. So let's get to number 7.
All right. Number 7 is a game that I also don't think you have played. It is
Mm.
a dry Euro game about
Oh,
upgrading goods and selling them,
oh,
and using them to build things.
so much
It
fun!
has artwork by acclaimed board game artist Clemens Franz,
Oh,
and is a game
great!
from acclaimed board game designer Uwe Rosenberg. The
Oh, I
game
can
is
see
Le
that.
Havre.
Yeah,
So this is, of all of the games he's designed, the most economic. What you're doing is you've got one, it's a worker placement game, but you've only got one worker, and you're only ever going to have one worker. So that's kind of interesting here. And so what you're trying to do is go out, you're going to collect goods. You'll then upgrade the goods and flip them over, which makes them better. And then you can sell them or you can use them to build things. You can build ships, which are going to bring you a few points, but really are going to be bringing you more food because at the end of each round, you have to pay an steadily increasing amount of food, and the ships help you accomplish that. You're building buildings. Every building you build is going to be worth its value in points. You can also buy buildings. If you're able to get enough money, you can just straight out buy things. And that's a better use of your money because it's, invested. And it's going to get you sort of its face value in points still. You can also sell them if you need some quick cash. That's not a good thing to do, but sometimes you have to. If you run out of money or can't feed your hoard, then you just take a loan. Loans are pretty easy. You have to pay interest on them each round, but you can also pay them off without much difficulty by the end of the game. It's all about it sort of changes the Agricola puzzle of, I'm going to grab all the resources, because you don't want to grab something just because there's a lot. You want to grab things that you actually need, because it's all about making use of the things that you have. So and it's about getting as much money as possible, and everything you do leads you toward that goal. I really, really enjoy this game. It's one that I love teaching. It's one that I definitely love playing with smaller player counts. At 2 is probably my favorite, but I also like it at 3. More than that, and it kind of drags on a bit. Because you don't have the same number of actions each round. There are only 7 actions each round, and they're divided up among the number of players. And so with 2, you feel like you have a little bit more control over what's going on. Anyway, that as it said, the only thing I don't like about the game is it's kind of a pain to set up because the cards are used. You got to pull out a bunch of different cards and put different ones in. But there's just so much to love about the game. And if you're a fan of dry Euro games like I am, this is definitely one that belongs, in your repertoire because it's just such a fascinatingly fun game.
sure. Yeah, okay. I
You
I
haven't tried
trust
it?
you. No, I trust you on that one. Yeah, I'll
Okay,
just trust you without, I don't need to try it out because I trust you. It's a great game. Sure,
good.
it's okay. Yeah, let's get to number 6.
All right, number 6 is a game that you also, I'm assuming, have not yet played. You've not yet seen the light. This is another deck building game, but
Ooh,
it's not really, right? There is some deck building going on, but there's a lot more going on too. The game is a wonderful Western theme, and it just got a reprint. It is Great Western Trail. So the older version is the one I have played more. The differences between them are very subtle. The new one has an extra kind of cow you can throw in, which is more like an expansion than anything else. But really, what the game is about you've got this hand of cards. And eventually you're going to make it to the end of this trail, and then you're going to have to turn in those cards for money, and you're going to place a token along a track based upon the value of the cards in your hand. What you want when you get there is high value cards that are all of a different type, a different suit, shall we say, a different color of cow. Because you're only, so for example, if I showed up with 4 5-point cows, but they're all the purple ones, then I only get $5. It only counts as five. You never count duplicates. And so the actions that you're taking along the trail are going to allow you to get points and do interesting things, but really what they're trying to do is to help you focus and refine your hand by allowing you to discard things, draw things, do different actions with your cards so that you're prepared when you come to the end of the Great Western Trail. And I just find that puzzle to be really interesting. This is a game that I will play really anytime. The artwork has improved a lot. The older version was quite ugly, and the newer version, well, I don't know if it's going to speak to you. It kind of looks like sort of older American kind of romanticized cowboy artwork, and that's kind of, I mean, that's what the game's going for, and I really like it. It's a great game with a lot to explore. It's my favorite game by Alexander Pfister. Definitely the best one for me of all that he's done, although I like a lot of his other things too. And although the theme isn't really all that interesting, it's just cattle ranching. The way that it works and the different things to try and explore make this one a definite keeper for me.
No, no, I haven't tried that one. Maybe I should try it out. The newer version, at least. Maybe.
This is one
I
you
don't
might
know.
want to give it, just like Concordia. This is one that you might find that you actually enjoy.
Okay. All right. That's fine. Let's get
All
to
right.
number 5.
All right. Number five. Number five is a game that I know you haven't played, but it is the one of the most thematic games that there is. It has at a time, at one point when I was doing these lists, it was my number one. It's gone down a little bit just because it's hard to get to the table. It's a big, long, complicated two-player game. And it, among more than any other game on this list, is a game that you have to play several times before you're really going to be able to just be great at it. The game is Twilight Struggle. And Twilight Struggle takes the history of the Cold War from sort of the end of World War II up until the early 90s and just lets you play it out. One person is going to play as the United States and one person is going to play as the Soviet Union. And you have it's one of the first game. I don't know if it was the first game, but it uses this card driven gameplay that shows up in a lot of war games. So you've got cards that are going to be useful for the Soviet Union, cards that are going to be useful for the United States, and then cards that are useful for both of them. And as you play a card, you're going to use it either for its value and do certain actions or for its effect. If you play your opponent's card, though, then you're going to use it for the value, and the opponent's effect is going to occur. And so you can only decide when that effect occurs before or after your action. And so there's a lot of sort of mitigating things and trying to make what you have work for you. And if you use your cards too early, lots of them go out of the deck. And so when you reshuffle, you'll end up with more of your opponent's cards. So there's a lot of, it's not a deck building game, but there's definitely some management of when things happen. The events are all based on real historical events. The artwork is not amazing, I'll be honest. It's a lot of old black and white photos. And the graphic design is sort of good for GMT, but not amazing. But it's very functional. But what you're really trying to do is to control different areas of the world because at various points the areas are going to score. And they're going to score when you play a card or your opponent plays a card that scores them. And that's kind of a wasted turn. But if you have those scoring cards, well, okay, you can. Then it becomes a different challenge as you're trying to time when it's right to make this scoring happen. But you have to do it, and you know it's going to happen eventually. And so there's sort of some planning and risk management. It is a fantastic game. It really will help you understand the history of the Cold War. You open it up, and this historical theme just comes out and goes everywhere. It is very steeped in history, steeped in theme. The only problems I have with it, well, one, it doesn't look amazing. I'll be honest there. Two, it is a longer game to teach, right? It's a harder game to get people into. And three, because the game, the events are always the same, right? You know what cards are in the deck. If you've played it a few times, you know what to watch out for. And with a new player, the new player might not know that. So sometimes you kind of have to say, okay, look, there is a, Russia or USSR. If you are going heavily into Japan, that's not a good idea because there's a card that's just going to straight out kick you out. So wait until that happens, and then let the player do something. But sort of let people know that those things are in the deck. That's kind of, I don't know. That's part of the teaching experience, I guess. I don't know. I love this game. I've always loved this game ever since the first time I played it. It is one of my favorite two-player games. It is one of the most tense and sort of heart-pounding experiences that I have had in a game. It just gives me everything I want, and I am always in the mood to play it, though usually with somebody who kind of already knows the rules. I really love Twilight Struggle.
Yeah, that's one of those that I will never play.
Well, I think that is a mistake, but you have to make your own decisions.
Thank you. Let's get to number 4.
Number four. Number four is the last deck building game on my list. It is the best deck building game. It is a game that I know you have played and you enjoy. The game is Clank.
Okay. Yeah, I know that game. Okay,
It
it is the
is
best. Yeah.
it is up from my number six, so I guess I like it a little bit better. There are three versions. There's Clank, Clank Legacy, and Clank in Space. They are all fun. They're all great. I think of the three, base Clank is my favorite just because it has the different expansions that you can kind of mix and match. But I love all three of them. In this game, what you are doing is you are an adventurer in either a dungeon or on a spaceship, and you are trying to break in and steal some sort of an artifact and make it out. And you're trying to do that before you die, because as you take different actions, you're going to make noise, and that means putting cubes on this track, on this area, and eventually those cubes are going to get dropped into a bag and pulled out, and whenever one is pulled out that's yours, it's going to be a damage for you. If you run out of life, well, then you fail to survive. And depending on where you are in the game, that could result in you having 0 points or having a, sort of a, you get to score your points, but you don't get a bonus. Or, hey, if you make it out and don't die, then you get some extra bonuses. That's kind of what's going on here. It's really interesting. And all of the expansions, all of the different versions have slight variations on the puzzle that sort of add a few different things to consider. There's one where there's this machine and it has these pieces that rotate, and so it might make paths open or close at various points in the game. There's one where you're underwater and you've got to, if you stay underwater too long, then you suffer negative effects. There's one with these spider webs that you've got to cut through, but when you do so, you get bonuses. Lots of different things to play with here. I just really love Clank. I'm always in the mood to play Clank. Now, there is a new game. There's a challenger for Clank, and that is a game called The Hunger. But I still think I like, and it's by the same publisher, and that's about vampires hunting people in the forest and trying to make it back to the castle before dawn. But I think Clank's a little bit more intuitive. The game length is a little bit more variable, which I like because you're not ever quite sure when, when it's safe to go farther or when you got to kind of start getting back. And the actions are a little bit simpler in this one. In Clank, I mean. I love Clank. I will always play a game of Clank, and I'll often choose a game of Clank over a lot of other games that I really enjoy. So I know I really like it. Legacy is also fantastic. It was great, well written, a fantastic experience that I would even play again from the beginning, even though I've kind of already experienced it. But any of the three games is going to be a definite hit, no matter what you do.
Yeah, I do have Clank Legacy version, and I have one extra game left there, still unplayed. But after
Uh-oh.
it's ready, after it's done, it's a unique copy, a unique board, kind of unique board
Sure.
with unique cards, etc. Your choices that I can play further, and I think I'll be fine with Clank Legacy because
Sure.
I don't play this game that often. And I think the finalist version of Clank Legacy will be enough for me to play further if I really want to.
Hmm.
But yeah, I do love this game as well. It is, I would say, it is the best deck building game. Definitely,
Yeah.
I agree on that at least.
All right.
And let's get to number three.
All right. Number three. So, if you know me and you know the games I like, the next three aren't going to be much suspense or drama. There's three games that are missing, and they're going
I,
to be in the top three slots. The
I
first one we're
pretend that
talking
I am.
about.
I'll pretend that I'm surprised. Let's
Okay.
try it out.
Number three is down from my number two.
What?
And and that is a game, and it's just because it's a hard one to get out and play with more, other than by myself. And that game is Sentinels of the Multiverse. Sentinels of the
Wait,
Multiverse is
what?
one of the best games ever. It
Wow.
is I know, shock. I know you're shocked that I would like this game. But in this game, you are a band of superheroes, and you are fighting off some sort of cosmic threat, kind of like Aeon's End. But that's kind of where the comparison stops. What you're doing is you're using your special abilities, and the supervillain is enacting various schemes, and you're trying to beat the supervillain down before he beats you down, or before some other horrible thing ends the game. There are lots of different superheroes you can play as. They all have their own strengths and weaknesses. They're all a lot of fun. There are a lot of different villains now, which are a lot of fun too, and they all sort of change this puzzle up a little bit. There's even a cosmic threat called Oblivion, who is here the destroyer of all, and you're sort of having this epic, several hours long adventure where you're sort of all going out and going all in on this huge, impossible cosmic threat. But it's not impossible. You can beat it. It's just pretty hard. It's the only thing I don't love about this game is that it is one of the hardest games to play in terms of just game mechanisms. Right? There's so much tracking to be done. There's lots of plus minus. This does +4 damage, but because I have this card in play, it actually does -6. And there's a whole lot of just keeping track. It's a game that you need other people to help you with, just because there's so much to track. And that's the only thing I don't love about the game. But the stories that you're experiencing, these epic battles, the artwork on the cards it gets better as it goes along. I'll say that. But they're remaking the artwork for the sort of base set right now, in case you wanted to see where this artist has progressed. But I just love this game. I love the stories it tells. I love, these are the superheroes I want to see in a movie. These are the supervillains I want to see in a movie. And although they are based on sort of other superheroes that exist already in various comic book media, these ones are just, there's so much personality and story behind them. The creators have a very long podcast where they'll go through and talk about the histories and the design. There are things about this game where, if you've had it all along and then you sort of play the last expansion, there are little Easter eggs and things that pop up and amazing events that just sort of are so satisfying if you invest in this game. It is a lot. There's a lot. There's more cards in this game than just about any other game I own. It is heavy. It's huge. It takes up a lot of space. It's difficult to play. There's lots of things that you might say, I'm not sure I want it, but I do. I want it. I love this game. It has been at my number two. It's just down at my number three. And I still really love Sentinels of the Multiverse. I do not recommend it to everybody, though. This game is not for everybody, but it definitely is for me.
Yeah, I had some great plays of it. I loved it some point and hated it at some point. It's love or hate kind of a thing here, in my opinion. And yeah, this game is this game is great, but it's also its worst enemy. The game
Hmm.
itself, uh, the rules, the upkeep, the tracking, everything is just a huge enemy for this game
It
for
is.
people playing it more than Oblivion itself. Uh, that's why it's long gone from my collection. though I appreciate the moments I had. Some games were terrible. Some games
Sure.
were great. I had some really great moments, like where the I had one of the base game, or I think I had a few expansions. The basic, I mean, like long time ago, and we played it with two more friends, and I remember we were kicked out, and two of us, and the last one he had this angel. I think was the is it the
The
angel?
Fanatic is the name of the character.
Fanatic,
Who's
sorry,
an angel.
but something like angelic powers, something like that. She had that, there was a certain combination or a card that could make the difference, and strike the st- has have a huge damage on
Yeah.
the villain. I
She
don't
has a
remember what.
card called Divine Retribution where it does as much damage as you have.
Yeah, yeah. So something like that. And there was like we built up to this moment. We're like, okay, we're not gonna win. We're not gonna win. And then we're like, okay, we need to. There was such a great moment
Yeah.
where
There are
it was
great
like,
moments in the game.
boom, that last card on the verge of death, and it he saves us all. And yeah, that was
Yeah.
great. But I also had some really bad games of it, and it was
It
like, okay,
I agree. It's a game that gets in its own way, but I still love it.
that's fine. I can give a pass for you on that one.
Okay.
Uh, Number two.
All right. Number two is also not going to be hard to guess if you follow my tests, my tastes here.
The
This is
tests.
a or my well, it's not a
Are
test.
you
Well,
are you
I bet
positive?
you could. I bet you could probably guess the game if you gave it a little bit of thought, but I will just spoil it for you here. The game is Spirit Island.
I Wow. I
Yeah,
wow. No.
who knew that I liked that game? So, Spirit Island is a cooperative game where you are various nature spirits and you're on, well, an island. And the island is being invaded by colonists. And you do not want the colonists on your island, and so you are trying to push them off. You're trying to kill them, scare them, do whatever you can to get people out of your backyard and off back to Europe where they belong. And what you're doing is you're going to take each player takes a spirit, and that spirit has different ways that it's going to play. It has some sort of core cards that it has. It has some core powers that give it special abilities, and as it sort of constructs its deck, I don't know that I would consider it a deck building game because you're just sort of, but you are definitely constructing your hand of cards and buying and tweaking things, and then you're also upgrading your powers so that you can get more energy to allow you to pay for more cards and allow you to play more cards as well. And then, based upon the number of the symbols that are on those cards, you can unlock other special abilities. It is one of the most procedural games that there is, right? It's definitely a game about manipulating that procedure because you do your things and then these invaders will do things in a very prescribed order, and a lot of it is stuff that you can see, right? You can sort of plan for it. There are event cards that will change that up a little bit, but you can really do a lot of planning, and it's about sort of saying, okay, this is going to happen first, and then this is going to happen second. And so if I'm able to prevent the first thing from happening, the second thing won't happen. And so there's a lot of that kind of manipulation. There's a lot of manipulation of these very different spirit powers that you have. There are now two expansions, and the expansions add so many new spirits that I just, I need to do a ranking list of my of the spirits in order at some point because I've played them all and I've played them all a bunch. And there are some that I really like and some that I like a little bit less, but that's just because of my play style. They have different strengths and weaknesses. The game is not particularly long, but it is very brain melty. It can be, especially if you add more players in the mix and somebody who's not quite yet familiar with it. It's a harder game to learn and get into. But if you're willing to invest a little bit of time into it and play it, 10 or 15 times, which I know for some people is a lot, then it can really be a very satisfying experience at that point. It is one of those games, like we've talked about, that you really need to make it the game that you play and you play a lot. I was looking up to see how many games I've played. I'm at 255 at this point, And I would
Wow.
gladly double that. I just love it. And then also, in addition to all that variability, you can add character to the invaders so that they do different things better or stronger, or they have different strengths and weaknesses themselves. Or you can play with scenarios. The base game came with some, and the expansions, now there's probably about 20 of them, that sort of change the puzzle up a little bit. They make you win if this happens, or you make it so that you can't win if another thing happens. It's or one where you're looking for different artifacts. There's just a lot of different things to explore in that space as well. I really love it. I'm a huge Spirit Island fan, and the more I play the game, the more of a Spirit Island fan I become.
Yeah, as you kind of described, it's a lifestyle of a game, kinda. You need to invest your time in it. You need to invest yourself in it, definitely, because it's very heavy. It's I feel like though being up on the rankings and on BGG, it's the same with quite a few games. Like Twilight Struggle is very high in the rankings, and Gloomhaven as well. But because it has a very dedicated fan base that rated a 10 out of 10, that kind of a thing. And those who are not really into these games that just don't play it and don't rate it,
Right.
it's not well-rounded game, in my opinion. Uh, that's why it's so high. That's why such lifestyle games are high on the BGG rankings. But I would like to say that don't don't trust the rankings and just go into this game looking at this game specifically at reviews, written or video reviews. Go and see if this game is for you because I thought I will love it, the whole world, everything like that. And wow, I was so underwhelmed. And look, as Kyle says, huge fan. Kyle loves the game. I don't at all because for me it was boring because I what I like in cooperative games is where give me the situation and tell me I can do a bunch of stuff and I can do this and this and that and that's my choice where and what to do. This is it's all so scripted in this game in my opinion. The exact things you need to do in order to win. Like you have to, you know, I don't like such puzzles in games. That's just me. Like for example, if I play Robinson Crusoe or I play Subterra, for example, I can go explore here, go do this, and go do that. That's my thing, and I can win either way if I'm lucky as well. Here, it's just so scripted. It's the same with Legends of Andor. It's oh, I cannot stand that. That's
Yeah.
why I think I didn't like it at all. But I can see people loving it as you do. So
It's definitely a game, like kind of like you said, it's a game that people really love and play a lot, or don't play at all, or maybe play once and say, "Ah, that was a lot."
yeah, that was
And
me.
and that's sort of an experience thing, right? That's why I said you got to play this game a lot but if you do play it a lot, also Too Many Bones was like this, or Through the Ages, or even Sentinels of the Multiverse, right? If you
Yep.
play these games a lot and you sort of get to the point where the rules are in the background and you can kind of focus on both the story and the puzzle, there's a lot to love here. And then the game shoots up for you. Like, I mean, I think when the game started on my list, it was probably down in the 80s. And it has steadily gone up each year as I have played it more.
Okay. All right. Let's get to number one.
Okay, my number one is a huge surprise for everybody. It is a game that I never talk about. It's a
War game.
game that it's a very secret game. Nobody really knows that I
Mm,
even like it. I like to keep
wow.
that kind of thing under my hat. The game is called Summoner Wars.
Oh,
Now, I will say at this point, it's very specifically Summoner Wars, the first version, not the second edition.
the
I will
master
mention
set.
well, yeah, you can look at the Masters. I would look at the Alliances set. That's the best artwork, but it's sort of all one game, right? So Summoner Wars started out as just two very small boxes with four different armies that could fight each other, and has kind of grown. And the first version grew and emerged until there were 40 different kind of base decks. And then they decided, it kind of went out of print for a while, and now it's been brought back in a new edition. And the two editions are very similar. The advantage goes to the old one, first of all, because I played it more, and second, because there's more there, right? There's 6 factions in the second edition, and 40 in the in the older one. So there's just more to explore. As the second edition grows and expands, maybe it will rival the first edition for me. Currently, I'm still a first edition fan. This is a game that I have literally, and I do not exaggerate, played at least 3,000 times. It was before I was tracking, but it was before I was tracking on this same app. I was tracking on a different app back then, so I don't actually have a figure, but I have played this so many times. This is a game that I would play every day. I would play every convention. I would play every time someone has come over. What you're doing is this is basically a card version of HeroScape, if you wanted sort of the high view. But what you have is a very small, thin deck of cards, 34 cards. And you have a summoner that needs to survive, and your opponent has a summoner that needs to, fail to survive. And what you're doing each turn, it's a very much a hand management game as well as tactical movement and combat. You've got a hand of 5 cards, and you can use them to put them on the board and have sort of a creature or something that's going to help you. Or you can throw them away at the end of your turn to be magic, which is sort of the cost, the money you're going to spend to summon bigger and better creatures in the future. So that hand management puzzle can lead to some very interesting decisions of, okay, I have this big, huge monster, but if I put that out, I have to save up for it for a couple of turns, and I probably won't be able to do very much else. Or you can sort of send a lot of small things out. When you attack and kill something, you get its soul, I guess. You take that card and put it into your own magic pile so that it's also building your resource supply. So it's definitely a game that encourages you to get out and aggressively combat your opponent so that you can take advantage of resources and get some advantages there. All of the different decks play very differently. They have sort of just different things they do. The summoners have different powers. There's event cards, 9 of them, that have different things that you can sort of plan your deck around. The board is tight. The combat is simple. You're going to roll a die, and if it's a 3 or higher, it's a hit. 1 or 2 is a miss, and so having more dice that you roll is definitely going to help you out. So there is some randomness there, but there's also decks that manipulate that randomness. There's just so much to explore here. There's so much to play with. It's not a long game. I can teach it in 5 minutes, and we can, play a full game in less than half an hour. It definitely is a game that you'll get better at the more you play. If you're winning, just because you know what's there and you sort of know how to make things work and you can make better choices. But even as a new player, those base decks are nicely balanced against the later sort of more complicated ones. You can always jump into this game, always feel like you have a chance, and it is just so much fun. It's a game that I can't ever imagine not wanting to play, and so that is why it is very clearly my number one.
Okay, that's fine. So that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
That has been Kyle's top 100 games of all time.
It has.
Been a lot, but
It's been 100 games.
Yeah, but it's a lot to process. If you haven't watched the previous videos, go watch them. Many games we talked about. What I can say is looking at your list, especially your 25 through 1, let's say, your most well loved, most well regarded games for you. You have a ton of kind of a lifestyle type games, in my opinion. So
I do.
You like your top 5 or your top 10. They are all like the ones that you need a ton to invest into. Not even money wise, but I mean like money wise as well. You want to get all the Summer Wars sets, but I mean
several. I mean, I wouldn't put Clank in that category. Clank's pretty casual, but
yeah.
I mean, my top
mostly.
25 games, there isn't a lot of shift in because the games I like are the games I play. And all of the games in my top 25 are games I'm always willing to play and always trying to recruit people actively to play. And so
Yeah,
that's, why and so maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, but I really love all of these games. And because of that, I really play all these games a lot. And so
yeah,
maybe that's why I have a little more experience with some of them. And maybe that's why some of these, even Summoner Wars is almost a lifestyle game. It's definitely the most casual lifestyle game there is because you can get in very easily. But,
kinda. Yeah,
because I play it so much, it makes me love it more. And because I love it more, it makes me want to play it more. And so it kind
yeah,
of becomes a lifestyle game for me.
yeah. It's just comparing to my list. Basically, if I think about my favorite games, I also have like this kind of games that I play a lot. I play all the time. I would love to play them all the time. Like, so let's say Stockpile or Abyss or etc. But I wouldn't call them lifestyle games at all because they're just easy breezy games that really easy to get people to learn them. That's why I think they are so high on my list. But yeah, it just so the rules don't get in the way, and that's why it's so much fun. And that's where I think I'm not I'm different from you in a sense the taste in the
Sure.
sense of taste that I don't want to invest too much time into games like Too Many Bones, etc. And you know,
Yeah. And another thing I will say, though, is if you play a game more than 100 times, the rules no longer get in the way.
true, true. But to get to that is a ton of
So,
time that you need. All right. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching,
yeah.
and we'll see you. I think in 2 weeks, and then there will be some weird holidays like Christmas, etc. Very soon
Yeah,
already.
we'll have to talk about that because I'm going out of town on the 18th. So, we
No,
probably want to try. But anyway, we'll figure that
we'll
one off
see.
out lot,
We'll figure it out.
offline. Mm.
We will eventually get to that usual schedule. Right now, we just had to do it 4 weeks in a row, basically. But we'll get
Otherwise, it
to
would go forever.
yeah, yeah. But we need to. We will get to back on the schedule in a week or two. We'll just get to that. Maybe
Sounds
we'll
great.
also get one video each week by doing a usual vidcast, Würfelcast, and then doing some kind of a special episode, a short episode of something, maybe discussion, maybe anything else. You can give us ideas in the comments as well. That might be great. So we'll think about that.
And I will
How
say
can we
I'm not doing
expand?
another. I'm not doing another 20 top 100 for another 2 years. So don't worry about that.
Yeah, true that. Anyway, bye bye.
Bye.